Hey, everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It is a joy to be with you after the 4th of July. I hope that you had a wonderful Independence Day. A wonderful Independence Day. What a beautiful holiday it was. In Chicago, we were able to have not just one major show of fireworks, they were in the neighborhoods. And it was safe and it was great. And the firecrackers were popping all for 48, 72 hours, but it's been great. It's been great. I hope you had a wonderful holiday. I hope you were with some people that you love and who love you. I'm Santita Jackson here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and of course, on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Everybody, please like and share, like and share, like and share right there, like and share and go to the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. The Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. That's the only page where I can accept friendships, everybody. So please get on over there and let's talk. Let's talk. Let's talk about, well, politics, the election. Who thought this was going to be a boring election cycle? Because it seemed like everything was predetermined at the beginning of the year. But wow, wow, wow. That is not how things have worked out. That is not how things have worked out. Indeed, um, I've had some people speculate on this show. Who knows who's going to be the nominee? I'm like, who are you kidding? I mean, Trump is a presumptive nominee, and President Biden is a presumptive nominee. No, I think we need to get to and through the conventions and get to and through the election before you can say anything. Now, the question is, will President Biden still be on the ticket? Interestingly, you've got key members of the Congressional Black Caucus who are calling for him to stay. They're saying, hey, you can't subvert the will of the electorate. And then you have other donors, you see kind of sort of who runs the party, right? You have the donors who are saying, I'm not giving you another dime unless he gets off the ticket. So who's more important, the donors or the voters? Well, and what about the press? What did they know and when did they know it? It's been an open secret in Washington that he's been struggling with some form of brain disorder. And all I can do is speculate. I'm living with someone. Of course, I don't live with my parents, but I see my father almost every day. Almost every day. I know what Parkinson's does. I know what these neurological diseases can do because I've had to study them because, it's like when my brother was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Everybody in the Jackson family's got bipolar, as my mother said. You're as well as your sickest child. When I underwent weight loss surgery, everybody underwent it, and all of my family members knew a lot about it and what I needed to be eating. Um, when our father was diagnosed with Parkinson's, we all got educated in it. So we're going to talk about that and what he might have, because now we see that the White House has had at least 9 visits from one of the top Parkinson's specialists in the country. He has been going to see them regularly since 2023. What does that mean? And then at the bottom of the hour, we're going to talk with Jim Narakis from the Fairness and Accuracy Reporting. He's the editor of their magazine, Extra. We want to know from him, what did the press know and when did they know it? And what is their responsibility in sharing this information with us? And in the second hour, we're going to have Ray McGovern, the former CIA specialist who was in charge of presidential briefings. It's a huge position. He was the first official person from the government that the president would see for almost 30 years. And he would brief the president, let the president know just what was going on in the world, domestically and really internationally, because internationally is really the bailiwick of the CIA. I want to know from Ray McGovern, what about the redundancies in the White House? How, if a president is struggling with his or hopefully one day her health, what what safeguards are built in, and what are the particular issues that are facing this president right now? Because that's the real thing. We are in the midst of a lot of domestic and international crises, and I want to know from him what what are we looking at? What are we looking at? But you know, I had to reach out to one of my favorite people in the world, one of my favorite people in the world, first, so that we could kind of get on steady ground in terms of what we're looking at with the president. Um, Whether you voted for him or not, you've got to be concerned as a human being, everybody. This is someone who's our president. It matters. His health matters. He's also a husband. He's a father. He's a grandfather. He's a friend. He's a brother. He's got people who love him, who are living with this every day, who are looking at him and they are worried. You have colleagues who've seen him who've been worried about him. They've been worried about the country. So we've got a lot to look at right now. And I could not think of anyone who is better prepared uh, to talk about this. Of course, he has been at Harvard, but he's a Howardite. We claim you first, that's right. And indeed, he's the former director of the Illinois Department of Public Health. And he's a veteran, so he understands that system as well. He was the commander of the Joint Medical Command and State Surgeon General. Um, we salute you, our veteran and our beloved friend, Dr. Damon Arnold. How are you this morning?
I'm doing well. Doing well.
Well, you know, you had to know with something like this, when it's medical, but also when the medical meets the political, I'm always going to call you. Because I felt that, you know, there's a lot of speculation. And I think that we need to, while you're not diagnosing the president because he's not your patient, I'd like to know just generally what we're looking at. Because it's unsettling. When we saw the debate almost 2 weeks ago, um, the quiet part was said out loud. And it was unsettling. I don't think any of us know wherever you are on the political spectrum, how much we depend upon the president to be well. FDR knew that. That's why, even though he was in a wheelchair, he knew that during a Great Depression, he needed, we needed to see him on his feet. Think about that. Now, does that mean that we slight people who are struggling with physical infirmities and mental infirmities? Yeah, we do. Should we? No. Because many of us are struggling with a lot of things and we have to learn how to cope and work with it. So, I don't do this to say that the president should be removed from the ticket. Not at all. No. I just need to know what we're looking at, what we're possibly looking at, and how he's possibly managing this and how you can live with it. Because I've got a father who's got Parkinson's and he is pushing to work every single day. And fortunately, it's ironic that one of the great communicators of the age is struggling with his speech, but his mind is still there. So we've had to become even more patient, Dr. Arnold, and you know because you're one of his physicians. We've had to become even more patient and slow him down because he's used his mind moves so rapidly. He speaks so quickly. We've had to say, wait a minute, you've got to slow down. That's what the speech pathologist told you. But when you see this, because also as a physician, you see people from afar. You've seen me. You just seen me just as a friend, and you've said, "Hey, watch out for this. Watch out for that." What are we looking at? I mean, when you saw the debate, what did you think?
Yeah, with the debate. Thank you, first of all, Santita. I think you're bringing incredible topics to the public, and I applaud you for that because people need to be informed when they're starting to make decisions or thinking through things. And being an open-minded person and having the vision to see things in collective and to make sure that we are taking a good view of the world and the people that we're dealing with, especially when it comes to a presidency. This is really very important for us. But Parkinson's disease, I saw several different features that are potentially that, but we have to keep in mind that the differential diagnosis, which means that if I were to cough, it could be asthma, it could be pneumonia, it could be a common cold, it could be the flu, it could be many, many different conditions. So we call that a differential diagnosis, where you have multiple conditions that can give you the same symptom, a cough. So when we're looking at it, we have to think that there are some other things in the background that could potentially be causing his symptoms. But there are a constellation of features that that suggest that something is going on. You can have a tremor in your hand with Parkinson's disease. That can be your first symptom that something going on with you. Slow movements or difficulty standing or walking. A person can also have stiffness of their muscles, where it's difficult to relax their muscles, and a loss of balance or coordination. So these rhythmic movements of the muscles can cause problems with a person walking, and we call this, fascinating gait, where the person has a shuffling gait, a slow shuffling gait. So there are features that we look at, and loss of coordination and balance is particularly disturbing. The person may feel that they can fall. You also have sleep disturbances and other things like fatigue. But the cognitive part of it, which everyone keeps focusing on, and they keep looking at, how's he thinking? As you were mentioning, you can have confusion at nighttime, which is called sundowning. We see that in the hospitals all the time. People who are getting older will have a tendency to sundown, where their cognition is not as good at nighttime. It was interesting that they had the debate at night. That was something that he was having some difficulty with that, and also facial features. You can have problems with a person having a stare, a blank stare looking into the distance. That's another
And the
features.
and the freezing in the face. Yes, they
And
call it the mask.
the
What
mask face, like face, yeah.
what is that? Because
Well,
people were struck by that too, by this almost like this blank stare, and it's as if he could not really express emotion.
yes, yes, and that's something that we have that one famous view of people like Mitch McConnell when he was steering and lost. I
Yeah,
started saying differential could be vascular, it could be other things, but a facial feature like that, it's just that you don't have the control over the muscles in your face, and it's almost like a withdrawal of your control of those facial features. But you can be very cognitively intact and think. You can have difficulty speaking, and soft speech or voice box spasms. So even during the talk, those things are potentially seeing, people were witnessing certain things that were giving them some anxiety about, who is this is he having problems, is he up to the job. And you can have jaw stiffness and reduced facial expressions, and this is as part of what would be a Parkinson's disease process, and we have to be careful about looking at that and automatically ascribing it to Parkinson's disease. um, so, those are some of the things that, a person can come into. But there are different stages of Parkinson's disease, and it's really interesting. It's important to talk about those. You have 5 stages. So stage 1 and 2, these are early stages where they can last 2 years per stage. But for the second stage, it's actually 5 years. So most of the stages, 1 through 5, you have about a 2-year time period. But 5 years for the early stage 2, and then three, stage 3 is 2 years, 4 and 5 are 2 years each. Those are advanced, um, disease. So right now, if he's really in a very early stage, if it were the true diagnosis, he still has, time where he can be treated with medications. Um, and when you were talking about, incapacitation and physical, disabilities and things like that, the person who came to mind right away was John F. Kennedy. He had terrible back pain. He was on painkillers all the time for his back condition. He had,
and he had
reportedly
Addison's disease, right?
Addison's
Addison.
disease as well. That's right. And so that was, with the adrenal gland. And so he had other medical conditions that were keeping him back from being there, but he actually had a good persona. So the public's perception was that this is someone that doesn't have any problems, but he had severe problems as he was leading the country.
I mean,
Um,
in fact,
mhm.
it really, it was it it was difficult for him to walk at times.
Correct, correct. He was a veteran. He actually injured his back. He was on a PT 109. He dove into the water to save other sailors because he was an avid swimmer. He grew up in, as a swimmer on the east coast of the United States. And so his family was really into that kind of thing. So he actually was, that kind of person that would stand up and do what he needed to do for the nation despite his physical disability. Um, but I think that that's one of the things is that we have to figure out if this is true. What stage is he in? There's so many different treatments now, as I know that with carbidopa, levodopa. That's one of the standard treatments. But there are several things that are being used now, uh, and they are Cinemet is in that category. But we also have things like dopamine agonists, that are being used as well. And Mirapex is one. But these things are multiple things that we can be using, anticholinergics and that kind of thing, to try to control the symptoms. Um, but you can also, if it goes to a really advanced stage, you have things like deep brain stimulation and MRI guided ultrasound, where they can actually, burn the tracks in the nervous system that are causing spasms and causing repeated problems with with motion and motility. But I think that this is something that we have to keep in mind that as time goes on, we have new technologies coming out all the time, and they're doing some things now with alpha uh, seed amplification assay, um, and these things are um, things that can go for the diagnosis, early diagnosis. Spinal tap fluid is used in that, and you can pick up clumps of this material. It's a protein, alpha synucleic acid, um, and this is found in the Lewy bodies. And these things can be sometimes used as an early diagnostic method. That's a newer technology coming out. You have other things that are being done with MRI scanning, um, to rule out other diseases. So there are many other things that are out there that can be used to rule out diseases that are on that spectrum of things I was talking about, the differential. So he's probably going, if he were there, he'd probably be going through other different types of testing to make sure it's not something else that's going on.
Well, given given what we're seeing, is he able to perform the duties as president? I mean, when you have this diagnosis, as it advances,
Mhm.
does it interfere with your ability to do your job? I mean,
Mhm.
because mentally, the
Yeah.
question is he all there?
Yeah, yeah, and that's one of the things is that as you're, about 80% of people with this at the end stage, towards the end stage of the disease. So once the motoric problems start coming up, where you start seeing problems with walking and all those things, about 10 years, about 80% of people have some form of dementia,
Mhm.
um, associated with the Parkinson's disease. So there is a time period. So what's really critical here is staging, finding out how early it is, because he have complete full mentality. If you listen to him, and they start asking him about his ability to do things, he can come up with quick answers about certain things, right? And he can say, well, I've done these things over the last 3.5 years of my presidency, and I can tell you that there were 80 people who did this and 40 people who did this, and these are the things. And I was working with the foreign governments. I was working with Israel. I was working with Ukraine. I was working with all these different subjects that he's talking about, so he can still be very sharp in his mentality, but it's sort of like stuttering, right? So if a person is stuttering, they can be very, very sharp in their mentality, but somehow physically they can't get that word out to you.
Mm-hmm.
But they know what the word is. They know how to do it, but there's a sort of a wall they have to climb over in order to get that to you. So it's a physical condition as well as one that is associated with mental uh, uh, complications as well. But you have to be very careful about the stage because it can be very frustrating. If you can think about it, if you ever had a flu that was really bad, right, and you were laying in bed and you knew that I have to get up and go to work, I have to get up and do this. There's so many things that I have to do, and you can feel how frustrating that is because it's physically restricting you. You can't get up and do things you normally would, and so you have to recover from that. And so that's the kind of thing where we have to be very careful about the cognitive physical balance of where he is.
Well, I just remember the her tapes. You know,
Yeah.
when President Biden was interviewed,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
and by the special counsel Robert Hur, and there was this great hue and cry because he said, I don't want to charge him because I think he's a well-meaning old man who
Hmm.
struggles with his memory, and he's struggling so much. While I see some things that are troubling to me, let's just leave this alone because he's he's struggling. And I think, and now there's a call for all of the tapes to be released so that people can see and hear, read the transcripts and hear what Robert Hur encountered in those interviews. I mean, it's something. There's something going on for sure.
Yes.
Um, and just ultimately, does this disqualify him
Hmm.
from being president? I mean, is this a disqualifier or not? I mean,
Hmm.
because of course Franklin Delano Roosevelt had different issues, but then we have Woodrow Wilson, who
Right.
had a stroke, and he could not function, and so his wife essentially took over his duties. Because quite honestly, politics being what it is, people feel sorry for you the first day. The second day, they smell blood in the water or see blood in the water, and they're coming for you. And that's just the look, everybody. That's the reality. So, to be fair to Mrs. Biden and their family, they
Mhm.
know that once they release the reins of power, it's going to be a very different world for them. And we
Yes.
can always say, okay, you got to put the country first. I hear you. You're right. I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. But we don't know what they're dealing with. We don't know what her conversations with her husband are like.
Yes.
But we do know, like you said, having the debate at night was not. Many people said, I don't know if that was the best thing because that's when you're not at your. Most people are not at their best at night.
Right. I know
um, you
that.
know, but when you have this particular syndrome and some of these brain issues, which he has had before,
Right.
the aneurysms almost killed him in the late 80s.
Right.
Um, Performing at night is not a good thing, but the question that people have now is he capable of performing his duties? Is one capable, if one receives the Parkinson's diagnosis, and I think this is for anyone, should you retire? And how does that work? I mean,
Mhm.
what, in your estimate, and not just in this case, but just generally speaking, because
Mhm.
this is not a disease. It's something that impacts me because it's in my family, but it doesn't really hit you until it's someone you love. So
Yeah. Yeah.
but the president is someone we all love. It certainly he is a touchstone in our lives,
Mhm.
and quite frankly, you need to know that he's all right.
Yes.
you
Yes.
know so and he is in possession of the nuclear codes. This, Dr.
Yeah.
Arnold, you're a veteran, you know how important that is. So
Right.
what, Should he be in charge of the nuclear codes? I mean, because I didn't elect his staff.
Mhm, mhm.
No,
Yeah,
he's the guy.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, one of the things that even with the nuclear code, there are several levels of security about using that code, and it's even though he has the power to do it, he just can't, inadvertently push a button.
Mhm.
There are
So
several levels of
there are redundancies that are built in.
redundancies, right, and put safeguards around the use of that. But up to this point, I can't, he's not the kind of person that from his, it's not going to change his perspective on life about how, he should proceed. And uh, I haven't seen any indication that that's the kind of person he is, where he is going to move in an authoritarian way and then push a button on someone and
Yeah.
say that this is it. So
Can we trust him with? Can we trust him to be president at this time?
well, I think so. I think that right now we have to do the staging and look at what stage is he in,
Mhm.
and after
If indeed this is what we're looking at, we do
yeah,
know,
correct.
just just as you know that everyone, there are now press reports, credible press reports that show
Right,
the White House log saying that since 2023, one of the top Parkinson's specialists in the country,
right.
in the space, in the world,
Yes.
has been visiting the White House at least 9 times since 2023,
Mhm.
as specifically a Parkinson's specialist, which is suggestive of at least the suspicion that he has Parkinson's. And what we saw the other week made us believe that that's what he's got. And it's an open secret, as you
Right.
know, we before we pivot from you to Jim Narakis from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, it's been
Yeah.
an open secret in the media that
Mhm.
cognitively there's been a sharp decline.
Yes.
Just as I mean, as it, because I know what you've been trying to help Reverend Jackson keep on going, and you have been great about that. Because your thing is he's got to keep working because number one, this is oxygen for him, but he also can. Can he keep up the hours that he is accustomed to keeping up? You know that. No,
Yeah.
but is he
Right.
up to the job?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Santita, because one of the things is that when he ran and assumed the first presidency, before this stage of his life, for the last 3.5 years, we really didn't see this earlier on. So if in fact he does have something like Parkinson's, I have a tendency to lean towards it being more in the earlier stages,
Mm,
which means that he can probably function. As I was mentioning, stage one is about 2 years. Stage two, that's the early stage, is about 5 years. You're talking about 7 years. So, um, you know, uh, being able to function with that, with medical therapy, those kinds of things, it may be something he can function with. Um, as you were mentioned before with John F. Kennedy, he had Addison's disease, so he had to go through some medical treatments while he was president. But he was one of the greatest presidents we've had. Got a lot accomplished. Tried to get things in order. And in the time period of 3.5 years, some of the accomplishments that President Biden has had told me that it is an indication to me that he has mental acuity and functioning.
mhm.
He put a lot of people into the court to judicial system, judges, and I think about 27 of them were African American females. It was like 35 people he put into in these thereabout, into positions. So many accomplishments. You know, uh, when he was looking at the uh, Affordable Care Acts, these are things where you have to really think about what you're doing. Inflation's coming down. I mean, there's so many things that are happening that are in a positive direction. I can't see um, this as being something that is coming from someone who's incapable of functioning. So, I think that the story is still out on whether he does have some involvement. We have to also remember that he's 80, his early 80s. Um, Many people forget their keys right now who are in their 40s and 50s, right?
Oh, there's no question. I get it, but I think with him, and one of the things that's been offensive to me,
Right.
there's we there's so much indignity associated with aging, and
Oh,
it
yes,
should,
yes,
because the thing is, it's never been about his aging, and I've been saying that on this show. The
yes.
question has been, is he healthy?
Is he healthy? Right, right.
Okay, so
Yeah.
they could just stop that because because the most popular elected official in the United States is Bernie Sanders. He had a heart attack when he was running for president. We don't want him to not run for reelection. So
Right,
that ain't the issue. The
right.
issue is he well enough to do the job?
To do the job.
And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what you're telling us is it depends upon where he is, and he's been making some decisions, or at least his team, because presidents don't function by themselves. They've been making decisions that have benefited the nation greatly. So we will stay tuned, but please, please, we need you to come back because I think. Um, this is something I think this is a wake up call for everybody, and Dr. Arnold, I'm sure you would agree that you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, which is to say, just because someone is ill does not mean you throw them overboard.
Right, right. Exactly. And I think that, if, and that there are people around him that have to be supportive of any president, right? And we've all been in different positions where you needed to have a team that is um, that's wary, that understands what you're doing, and are supportive of what you are engaging in. So that's going to be important, to have people around at any age for someone to have that. And again, we have to wait the other diagnostic tests if he's undergoing any testing,
Mhm.
PET scan, positron emission tomography, or magnetic resonance imaging. It's an MRI or ultrasound. These are other tests that rule out other things. We still are in very early stage of trying to figure things out. Um, and I
Well,
think
we're in the early stage. We don't know where they are
that
in
where
the
they
stage.
are, right, right.
Because I mean, so well, this is Dr. Damon Arnold. You can see what we've been in great shape in Illinois. He's the former director of our Illinois Department of Public Health, and indeed, he's been a state attorney, state surgeon general, veteran, and really just someone who's chosen public health over personal wealth. And I
Yeah.
thank God for you. And sending you so much love, Dr. Damon Arnold. Thank you. I know you're up anyway, but thank you for joining us so early.
Yeah, I do
Thank
get up early.
Thank you. You do, but I still appreciate it because we needed to have these gaps filled in.
Oh, yes. Well, thank you very much, Santita, and thank you for getting the message out and informing the public. We need to make informed decisions when we are making these vital decisions for the country about who we're voting for and those things. So I'm just happy that you are having this show and that you are pushing this issue forward and understand where we are.
Well,
And
thank you. I mean,
yeah,
because in fact, now you see, I brought up Jim Narakis he's the editor of Extra at Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting.
yes,
Indeed, when I want to know what the press, they look at the corporate media, they look at all media and help us to understand where they're getting it right, where they're getting it wrong, and what they're doing. It's always a wonderful lesson in media education when we have him here. And Dr. Arnold, you're free to stay. I know that you've got things to do, but I wanted to pivot to Jim Narakis because there is a bombshell story from New York Magazine. Um, Olivia Newsy, I believe that's how you pronounce her name. She is the reporter. She writes about the conspiracy of silence to protect President Joe Biden. And she's their Washington correspondent. She speaks of the, it's an open secret in Washington that the president has been struggling. It's an open secret in Washington amongst the press corps that he's had a sharp cognitive decline. I mean, because people have seen him, Dr. Arnold. I mean, that's part of the problem. People who know him and who he knows, because he's the kind of person who never meets a stranger. He remembers names, who you're married to, who you're dating, your children. He know birthdays. He's that guy. He is, but not anymore. And so Jim Narakis, I guess, and perhaps you need to hear this, Dr. Arnold. I mean, the question for me is has there been a conspiracy of silence? And what is the responsibility of the press, not the media, because that's a different animal. I'm talking about the press, the only protected profession in our Constitution. What is the responsibility of? Do they have a responsibility to let us know that the president is struggling? They knew that John Kennedy was struggling. They knew that FDR was struggling. They knew that Woodrow Wilson was struggling, but it's another day. Welcome back to the show, Jim Narakis.
Thanks for having me back on.
So what is it? What is the responsibility of the press?
Well, I think that there's an inherent conflict of interest in the way that we have set up our media, in that political journalism is access journalism. You are a great journalist in our system's values if you have access to the secrets of the powerful and share some of those secrets with the public. Basically, when the powerful want their secrets shared, that is by and large what wins you Pulitzer Prizes. It's what gives you a top job at the New York Times or NBC News. These are the it's the currency of Washington is being able to get the people inside to share their secrets with you. And so, yeah, and if the powerful have something that they really don't want you to know, that they really don't want the public to know, like the fact that a president is having cognitive problems, then if you share that secret, even though you're well aware of it because you deal with the president, you are going to be shut out. You are not going to be getting the secrets shared with you that's what your job is. That's what your boss thinks you're there to do, is to have the sources who will give you the secrets that they can put on the front page. And so you're in a very serious bind where the thing that you need to do your job, you can't keep doing, you can't keep having if you do your job, because really, the reason that the press is protected in the Constitution is because the public does need information in order to make informed judgments about who their leaders should be, and clearly the cognitive status of the president is something that people need to have some understanding of. That's one of the things, and I want to stress it's not the only thing that you need to take into account when you're casting your vote. So these journalists, to say it's a conspiracy of silence, it's in large part it's a conspiracy of keeping your job, of maintaining the relationship with the White House that you have to have in order to be what the press define, what the bosses in the media define as a first-rate journalist. And we at FAIR have a real criticism of this definition of what journalism is. The secrets that are shared by insiders in government are the secrets that they want you to know. They're not necessarily the secrets that you have to know. And in fact, like one of the few things that insiders have that informed observers outside who don't have this kind of relationship is what the powerful are like in their private moments. That's something that only people who have that access can tell you, but they can't tell you it if they want to keep having that access. It's a real dilemma.
But understanding that, because to fully disclose, as you know, my family's been on the other side of that. We've been reported on forever, and but we've also not had the luxury of protection. Although you would have one or two reporters who would say, "Hey, make sure make sure you do this, make sure you do that." I remember getting arrested at the South African Embassy when I was in college, and oh goodness, she's very, very, she's on CNN. She's very, very big. Jamie Gangel, who who covered my father's campaign, and she was covering because getting arrested at that time, that was a really big deal. And I'm about to go into finals. I get arrested with Congresswoman Cardis Collins and a wonderful sister from a wonderful Catholic order in Washington, and there we were. And she was holding the microphone and going. She was like almost mouthing what I was going to say because I was a kid. So she was, bless her, and I laugh with her about it now. And she was like, "I was just so happy to see you there, and I just wanted you to do well." Bless her heart. I was trying not to laugh as I'm looking at her going, "I'm like, are you serious right now?" She was like, "But it's gonna be, you're doing great. You're doing great." But that's very different than the president of the United States. I think as you were listening to Dr. Arnold, who's a former, no one is better at discussing the public and personal implications, because he does public health and personal health. And the implications for the personal health of a president impacts every aspect of our lives. And I think that's why I don't care where you are on the political spectrum. When you saw the president of the United States struggling, some people I know turned it off. They turned off they turned off the debate. He said, I can't see this because emotionally it's too much for me. Because we don't realize how much we have invested emotionally in a president. But I'm wondering, even with this access, because I know Reverend Jackson has never had the space not to give you access, because that's not he's the populace, so we gotta take all comers. It doesn't matter. But there's some people who are protected, and we know that he's one of those persons who's protected. But now there's speculation. I've seen it in the Daily Mail and with some other people who said, "Hey, perhaps because people have been concerned about the state of his health, perhaps this was a soft coup, that they wanted, that insiders in the White House who are now beginning to speak anonymously, he needs to be off the ticket." That they felt that this was the way to get him off the ticket. So there's that. And my question is, even though that opens up a whole can of worms, but this is what these people have bought because they didn't have an open primary process. So here we are. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's just a fact.
Yeah.
So now they're talking about even having a blitz primary where the donors are going to fund a primary, a mass of what? I mean, have you heard about that, Jeff? That is crazy. I'm like, who are you donors? Who are you people? But I mean, they're no pun intended. They're trumping the voters. I mean, you tell me I need to vote. You need my vote, and this is the only way this system works. But the donors start calling for him to resign, to get out. People talking about invoking the 25th Amendment. It's because the donors are doing it. The oligarchs, the 100 millionaires and the billionaires. Now there's a crisis. I'm like, are you serious? And then I've got Bob Woodward, who met with Donald Trump when he was president. Donald Trump is scared to death. He said, "Hey, we got some virus that's coming from China. We don't know what it is. And man, this is a mess. I don't know what it is. Nobody can give me any information." And we find out now, going down the street, that the intelligence community had a bone to pick with him, so they weren't giving him a lot of information either. So this is a mess now. And let's not act as if the president walked in and has all this power, because if they're liked, they get information. If they're not liked, John Kennedy, yes, I said it, you got problems. So I'm just trying to find out from you. I mean, and Bob Woodward held on to that because he had a book to release. People are dying every day. You don't say that, we got a bug out here that's a big problem. You took down a president, for heaven's sake. You mean to tell me you're not going to give me that information? I got a president who's clearly struggling. You all hold on to this so you can go to the White House, to the correspondence dinner, which is crazy. Yeah, I go, but it is nuts. But I'm not a journalist. But even I feel awkward. I'm like, because you can't say, I mean, you can't be friends with these people and report on them. You can't. But don't you think we're supposed to know, Jim, something?
Yeah, no, I do think it's incredibly important. A lot of political coverage in the establishment press is akin to theater criticism.
Okay.
There's to try to solve the impossible riddle of objectivity, where you're not supposed to have ideas about what is actually good for the country. You're not supposed to have ideas about what policies are better for the country. That is not supposedly your job as a journalist. I question that idea of journalism, but that is the idea. So when you're covering a political campaign, which is about which president would be better for the country, instead of addressing that issue, instead you address the issue of who's better at being a candidate, who's better at projecting an image, who's better at spinning. And so you read these things and you see it's all like shadows on the cave wall. There's no reality to it. It's just like who's better at making the image. And I think a lot of the coverage of Biden, particularly after the debate, has been this kind of theater criticism that like this guy is no longer ready for prime time, and he needs to get off the stage. We need a better actor who can say their lines with conviction, and then we'll have the kind of show that the audience has come to expect. And the campaigns are important, but they're important because they produce a president, and the president. Well, you're right. They're not all powerful. They do have an awful lot of power. And I was very sobered by a piece that Seymour Hersh wrote recently. Seymour Hersh is a legendary investigative journalist, and he has cultivated sources over the decades. He's got a lot of them, but he's also operated for many years outside of the establishment circle. He's not.
You don't see Seymour Hersh at the parties,
right? And he wrote a piece based on what he says are sources in the White House who are telling him that Joe Biden has had a cognitive decline in recent times, and that this is affecting his ability to follow arguments, particularly, he mentions, around the issues of Ukraine and Gaza. And this it really makes my blood run cold. When they talk about the inability to follow the arguments around Gaza, I have to say it does make sense. It does give an explanation for things that previously didn't make a lot of sense to me. Mm-hmm. Because the big riddle about Joe Biden is why he is following the Lyndon Johnson playbook from 1968, which he's old enough to remember. He was there. It was during his impressionable era of his political life. He should be very well aware of the fact that if you support an unpopular war, particularly a war that's unpopular among young people, while you are running for president, it does not bode well for your reelection chances. And that seems perfectly obvious, but you can't see any reflection of this obvious fact in the way that Joe Biden is conducting his policies regarding Israel-Palestine. So that was, I would say presidents make decisions that result in innocent lives being lost all the time. It's not surprising that they do that. They rarely follow policies that seem almost designed to make their political career a casualty. They usually are more self-protective than that. So the idea that Joe Biden is, because we've seen reports over the course of the Gaza crisis of that his aides are telling him this is a serious problem for your reelection. And if he is not able to follow that argument, that does explain why he's not taking his aides' warnings into account. On the question of Ukraine, Ukraine is an incredibly difficult balancing act between trying to defend the sovereignty of a smaller country against a country that has a vast nuclear arsenal, is super concerned about encroachment on its territory, is fighting this war that increasingly involves attacks across the Russian border, where Ukraine, using weapons provided to it by NATO, is attacking targets in Russia. And Gene has tried to make it very clear that he is, there are situations where he would use nuclear weapons to defend Russia's territory. It's a problem from hell, frankly. But the idea that you have a president who, according to this report, is not able to understand fully what his aides are telling him about this crisis is terrifying. It really is. It's incredibly dangerous that the possibility that you have a president who is presiding over this brinksmanship policy, with the worst case scenario being a nuclear exchange between the United States and Russia, without full cognitive capabilities. That's bad news.
Well, you queued this up perfectly for Ray McGovern, who's going to be our guest in the second hour, because that is one of his issues. Of course, he was the CIA analyst. He led the team that briefed the President of the United States. This is the first guy the President saw for almost 27 years. He said, these are the questions that we need to be asking, because we have got we got Israel, Gaza, the West Bank, we've got Ukraine, we've got BRICS, we've got the American currency, which is no longer reigning supreme in many areas of the world. There's a lot going on. And for him not to be aware, and for, let's be frank, his staff has put him out here. Your staff will protect you. He has been put out here because some people are concerned. And I think we need to pay attention to that. And I hope that people go to, I've got 1 minute before we go, Jen. Your thoughts?
Well, I do want the people in the press to be doing their best to conveying reality to the public. And I think that this issue has been very, very much instrumentalized, where we talk about it when we think it's going to have the effect that we want, and we don't talk about it when we don't think it's going to have the effect that we want. Like when people out in the Democratic Party, people outside the Democratic Party, think that keeping Trump from a second term is super important. And there was a time when the best way to keep Trump from getting a second term was to not talk about Biden's cognitive state. Now it seems like the idea is that the best way to keep Trump out of the White House is to talk about Biden's cognitive state. We really should be talking about these things all the time, and not just with Biden, with Trump as well. You know, Trump has cognitive issues that people have noted. That people used to note in 2020 was a fairly significant issue. That seems to have been dropped as a issue of concern. You see people talking about the debate, talking about Biden's cognitive issues versus Trump's lies. Well, what about Biden's cognitive issues versus Trump's cognitive issues? That's an issue that we got to be talking about as well.
Absolutely. I mean, because the fact is that, and that was something, Dr. Arnold, I got 30 seconds to you, Dr. Arnold, because that's something that you brought up.
Oh, absolutely. He has signs of cognitive decline as well. And one of the things I'm really afraid of is that it's the intent of what a person's character is. Because, Adolf Hitler was a great orator. He had a great stage presence. He was able to captivate people. Do you really want him running your country? Our perception of people can be very separate and apart from what their intent is. And both of them have had some signs about cognitive decline. But the question is, ultimately, what kind of country do you want?
Well, and that's why you need a media that are free, open, fair, and detached from power, because Hitler also had a media.
Yes.
Who portrayed him positively. He was portrayed positively in our media.
Right.
Yes.
So, hey, come on, because there's a reason that we turned all of these Jewish people who were seeking refuge here, we turned them away. So, that's why the points that you're making, Dr. Arnold, they're important. The points that you're making, Jim Narekas, they're important. Yes. You can't have an open secret like this.
Yes.
And not deal with it. You can't. Yes. It's not right. Coming up, Ray McGovern, everybody. Support fairness and accuracy in reporting. Get extra. Look, I've shocked you. I told you I shocked your office more than 30 years ago when I walked in there on my way to dinner, and I bought everything I could find because I just think
I remember that.
They're like, "What is this? Who is this woman?" I'm like, "I love you, and I brought some money, and I want to buy all your magazines. Anything you have, I want to take it. I love it." And I love them, and I love you. And Janine Jackson, you all have been doing such magnificent work, you and your team, and Dr. Damon Arnold.
Oh, thank you, Santita.
Thank you so much.
Everybody, stay tuned. Stay tuned. But fair.org, they need your support, everybody. They need your support. Freedom ain't free, and you're not going to ride to freedom in Pharaoh's chariot. Reverend Jackson says that. Support them. Support them, everybody. Ray McGovern coming up on the Santita Jackson Show. Wow. What a great show. Sending you all so much love. Back in just a minute.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Sending you